Hello there everyone, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns and today I'm going to show you how to make this Starry Diamonds beaded necklace, and this is the one that I've made here. So these are just the colours that I've chosen to combine, but obviously you can achieve very different looks depending on what colours that you choose. I just chose mainly these two different blue colours, and then we have this beaded section going all the way along the neckline, and on the ends there I finished them off using wire protectors and then just whatever kind of clasp that you want to. I'm using a lotto claw clasp and extender chain. But obviously you can choose whichever kind that you prefer. And then to make the necklace lay nicely in the neckline, we kind of add this bend into the middle of the whole beaded section. So we do that along the way. We basically just change position of how we add some of the beads. So it's going to lay really lovely on the neckline because of that bend. And obviously all the sparkle that we have as well with all the bicones and the rose montees on each of these little stars is going to give a really nice play on your neckline as you wear it. Now if you like sets of jewelry, fear not, because I already have a tutorial for this bracelet here that I originally made, which is what I based the necklace off of. And I'm going to leave a link to that in the description box down below in case you want to check that out. And obviously you can make them to match if you want to, just like I have here. And again, this is also full of lovely sparkle. You can see I've also finished off the ends there in the same way, using the same findings. But then if you want to learn how we make this necklace to match the bracelet, then keep watching this tutorial. So it's these materials here that we're going to need. First of all, we have the main beads here, which are the GemDuos, and I've got 3 different colors. Now you can use more or less colors, it's completely up to you, but I'm going to be using first of all backlit sapphire, and then backlit aquamarine, and then I'm also using bronze aluminium for the silver color, and this is basically just a matte silver. And then as for the sparkle that we're adding in, first of all I have my rose montees here. So these are going to be the very center of the stars, and then here I have some Swarovski bicones. So these are going to be added as a sparkle along the outside edges. And then the threading material that I'm using is this FireLine here alongside my beading needle as well. And then the way that I'm going to be finishing it off is using these wire protectors here, or wire guardians. So you're going to be adding them into the beadwork, and then once you've done that, we can then attach whatever findings that we want to. So I'm using a lotto claw clasp and extender chain there, and obviously using the jump rings to attach it together. Now if you check out the description box below the video there, you'll find that I've put a material list down there as well, along with any links that you might need. But then let's get our beads and thread ready, and let's get started. So firstly then we need to cut a length of our thread. Now what I have here is about a wingspan and a half because I feel comfortable working with that, but it doesn't really matter how much you cut because it's a long necklace that we're making, so you're going to have to add in more thread anyway. So whatever really you're comfortable working with. And also what I've done is we need to make sure we leave one end open, so I'm not tying a knot here to kind of work as a stopper. Then what I have done is I've attached a needle on the other end and then put a tail through. Pretty decent length there because it makes it shorter to work with, and obviously then we can just release the tail as we need it and we'll go through and do the beading. So what I've then done first of all here is laid out all my beads ready so I can just use them when I need them. And then we need to start from one end, so I'm basically going to start using the kind of in-between color, which is going to be the silver one in my case. So what I'm going to do is just get 3 beads out here, because we're not starting with one of the stars, we're actually starting kind of on the end to also make it a nice end that we can then finish off using those wire protectors later on. But first of all I just want to start with the beads, and then I have my needle and thread ready. So what we can do is just lay them out how we want to go through them basically. So I want to start out the end looking like this. So we have kind of one on the point and then one on either side on the top part of it. And I need to go through the holes in all of them there, so straight through the middle. So the bottom one of the first one, the top hole on the middle one there, and then also the bottom hole in the last one. So like that. And then what I do is I just kind of grab hold of my beads and then I pull my thread all the way through so I get my beads down towards the bottom, but not all the way, because what I want to make sure to do is leave a bit of an end here of about 20 centimeters or so. Doesn't have to be precise, but an open end like I said, so I'm not tying a knot there, so we need to make sure we just kind of hold on to it to begin with until we've gone a few rounds, then it will be secure enough to let go. But make sure to leave this tail so we can use that to finish off and add those wire protectors at the end. So these are my first 3 beads. I then have my thread coming out towards the top there on this one. I need to go to the other hole and come down through, so in the opposite direction, and make sure to come out between the 2 points there, so basically in that gap. and then I pull my thread all the way through again. So now I have my thread sitting along the side of the bead. Now I want to add in my next bead. So this is going to be one of the colors, so whatever color you want to start with if you're using different ones. I'm going to be adding my dark blue first of all, and I need to add it in the right direction. So if I just lay it down here to show you. So I've got my first 3 beads like this. Then this one here, I basically want to slot into that space there. So I need to make sure I go through this side in this direction, to go through obviously the right way. And then while I'm here, I might as well go through the next bead as well, which is the other silver one in my case, to make sure that this new bead, the blue one, slots in between them. And then again I can just pick it up, hold what I can in my hands, then as I'm pulling my thread through and getting it tight, it's going to make sure the bead slots in there. So we now have a little diamond, you could say, with obviously the one side of it being a different color. So what I want to do now is, because this is kind of fiddly obviously to work with, I want to just go through this little path that I've created a few times to make it more secure, so I don't have to worry about the end of the thread being open. So I'm literally going to just go from, the thread is coming out from the right hole, how I'm holding it, and the silver one here coming down. So I'm going through the left hole, going back up. So basically the first 3 beads that I went through, I'm going through them in the same way again. I'm pulling my thread all the way through. So once we do that, my thread is again laying on the side of now this silver bead. And then like I said, I just want to go through this a couple of times. So I literally go through the next hole in that upper bead in the opposite direction again, coming down through all 3, including that blue one as well. Pulling that tight, making sure they're all sitting and slotting in together nicely. And then I just go up again. And it's already getting much more secure now. I can let go and it'll actually stay in place how I want them to sit. And then you can also just use that tail here that we left obviously to hold on to. I kind of like to hold that in my hand, and then I hold on to my beads with my fingers. So now I feel like it's secure enough, because we can always go back at the end. Obviously we're using this thread. So what we need to do now is get the thread into position to add in the next few beads. So to start making the very first star, continue from that first blue one. So again, I'm just going to go around the edge of that silver one, and then down through, but only the one silver and then the blue, not that last silver, so all 3. I'm basically having my needle come out between that blue one and then the 3rd bead, so the silver one as well, the last one. As I'm pulling this tight, this thread is still going to sit on the outside edge of that silver bead, the top one. But what we then need to do is swap to the outside hole in the blue one. So I'm just going from the inner one to the outside one and going up through it, so in the opposite direction. And then I'm pulling my thread tight, so like that. So I now have my thread in the right position to start adding in the other beads and basically continue making this very first star. So obviously we're going to continue with the same color as well. So I'm just going to lay it down here, because again we need to make sure we go through those beads in the right direction. So I'm going to get out the beads that I need. So in total we need 6 to create the star. So I need another 5 because I've already added that very first one. So just like this. And what we need to do is make sure we go through in the right hole in the right direction. So they're going to sit like this, and my thread and needle are coming up through that outer hole. So the next one is going to sit like this, and then we're going to continue to circle around. So that means I have to go through that hole there. So what I then like to do to make it a little bit easier is you can kind of lay them out until you maybe get the hang of it, it becomes easier. But then lay them out like this in kind of like a straight line, and then I literally just go through the right hole like that, and I just do that on all of them. All the way along until I have all 5 on there. Then I can just pick it up again. And then we go back through the original one in the same hole in the same direction. And then as I pull my thread all the way through, it's going to pull these beads tight together. and then bring them into that little star shape, just like that. But obviously now it's still a bit loose, so what I like to do is actually go through the exact same holes one more time. So you can just kind of open up a little bit, and then you just go through, continue the same path there, just a few beads at a time, making my way all the way back around again. And if it kind of loosens up, it doesn't matter because we can just pull it tight again. Just make sure we get through all of those beads. I can just kind of turn it around, make it easier as well. Make sure you don't skip any of the beads. Go through that next one, and again through the original one as well, the very first one. Pull my thread through. And now you just want to make sure you pull this tight as well. So obviously we don't have any loose thread, and the beads are going to end up sitting nice and tight together as well. So this is what it looks like now. So to get into position for the next bit, basically we're kind of already in the middle. So what we might as well do now is add in the rose montee to the very middle of it before we then move to the outside edges. So again, I'm just going to lay it down. So then getting one of my rose montees out here, just kind of laying out, and obviously this has two sides. There is a front where you have the crystal, and then the back is where you have those little channels in that kind of X shape like that, or cross shape. So the first time you go through this, it doesn't really matter how you go through it, but what we have is the thread and needle is coming out just after that very first blue bead, so in between that and the second one. So I'm just going to add my rose montee then, going through in one direction first of all, and then I'm just pulling this all the way down so we can get it to sit across the middle at the front, and then I let it drop like this. Now it doesn't matter too much right now if it's facing the right direction, because it might flip around anyway as we keep working with it, but just make sure once we pull it tight that it does. But then we have that there, so I need to now bring my thread and needle to the opposite side. So instead of being through that first bead, I need to go to the opposite one, which is the one straight across here, but through the inner hole coming from below, and then making sure to just go through that bead, so not through any of the other ones. And then we can pull it through. Make sure your thread does not get tangled up on anything, so any of the other points of the beads or anything. Just gently pull it through there. And make sure that that thread, like I said, gets kind of trapped in between. And also make sure when you pull this thread tight that the rose montee is sitting in the right direction. So if, for instance, it's flipped around, so the back is facing upwards, make sure you just flip it back so the crystal is facing upwards, because obviously it's the crystal that we want to be the main focus there of this bead. So we obviously have the other hole as well, so we're just going to go from this GemDuo and through that other hole, just like that, and then pulling the thread all the way through. Make sure the thread doesn't get tangled, so just undo it before if you can catch it. Then as I'm pulling this through, and pulling that thread nice and tight, that's going to really secure that rose montee right there in the middle. But to completely finish it up so it's nice and secure all the way around, we still have kind of one open end there, you can see. So what I want to do with that is basically go through that very first GemDuo in the same direction, just as we did before we actually added the rose montee in. Again, only go through that single one, so basically just like we did on the opposite side. And pull this through. And get it nice and tight. Now do also make sure that once you've made your little star here and you've added the rose montee, that your thread is completely nice and tight so we don't have any loose thread or loose beads flapping around too much. And then, to now get a thread and needle into the next position, we need to go this very first blue bead that we added in from this hole here to the other one, and again in the opposite direction. So we need to come down between the silver and the blue one, because we now need to get to the outer edge. And if you can, you might as well also go through the bottom silver one here in my case. If you can't, then just go through one at a time. Now pull this all the way. Just got a little tangle there. So make sure to undo that. And pull it all the way. Make sure I don't get caught on any other points there. So there we go. We now have the first star in place and also the very center of it, you could call it. So now to do the outside edge, this is where we now need to use our bicones. So again, I grab my needle, and then first of all, we're coming from the silver bead and we want to make our way to the very first kind of point in the star on this side here. And to reach there, obviously without having thread showing, just kind of bridge that gap. I need to add one bicone. And then just pick up my piece again, and then we just go through the outer hole in that next GemDuo, so the point you could say of the star. Just get my tail thread out of the way. And then we just pull the thread through, so that when we pull that all the way tight, that little bicone just slots in there perfectly. You can see the space. Now to get to the next one, you can see we have a bigger gap, so because of that, I need to add 2 of my bicones instead. It's going to fit in there now. Go to the next point in the outer hole that hasn't been used. And just avoiding any knots there, if I can help it. So that's now that bigger gap. Now on this side here, we now also need to obviously add more bicones, but also get ready so we can then continue afterwards and make the next star, in my case in the other color. So to be able to do that, I'm just going to put my piece down again. I do first of all want to add one more bicone on the needle now. But obviously, as you can then see, just get that on, is what we have is just as large a gap as the one we just filled. But what we then need to do is also add in more of the in-between color. So for that case there, I'm using that silver one. And we need to add them in the right direction. So we basically need to make them sit in the exact same way as I do on the other side here. So this one is going to slot in just like that. So that means I need to go through this side of it in this direction. Again, always making sure that my GemDuos that are facing, so the front is always facing up. It's a more faceted side, or in the colored ones, the blue ones, the actual color, because the back of them are silver there. But the back of it is also more flat, so you can tell the difference that way. And then I go through the next point in the star and pull it through, so we can then see how that slots in. So you can basically see it's just exactly the same as it is on that first side. And then to continue from there, we need another of our in-between color, because on this side, as you can see, we have 2 as well. So I need to add that in the exact same way so it slots in there. But then we need to then after that add a bicone and then go through the next point, just like that, so that when we then pull this tight, it slots in perfectly. And you can see we then have those silver GemDuos on this side perfectly opposite the first ones. And then just to continue, just kind of keep rotating my piece as well so it's more comfortable to work with. Just whatever you find most comfortable that works for you. And in this case here we have the wider gap on the side, so that means I need to add 2 bicones, go through the next point, pull that tight, and the last little gap here, just like the very first one, because we already have those GemDuos in place, I only need to add the single bicone, and then I literally go through these 3 GemDuos all the way. If you can go through all of them at the same time here, then do that. Otherwise, if you need to, you can always go through 1 or 2 at a time. But basically make your way to the opposite side by going straight through like that. And then again, rotating it a bit more. And as I pull this tight, slots that into place. And then just make sure all of it's tight here all the way around so we don't have any loose beads. Obviously these GemDuos are going to sit and kind of flap about a little bit, but that's going to be fixed once we go through and make the next star. So now what I like to do, because I'm in this place here, we've only gone through the outer edge, you could say, once with our thread. So what I like to do is basically go through the exact same thread path just once more. So you just want to follow that through the first bicone, literally as if you were adding in the beads, but obviously they're already there, so we're just going through it again. And this is really just to secure it more, make it much more strong and durable long term by having that extra piece of thread in there. And go through however many beads you can at a time. If it's just one, then that's fine. Pulling that tight, making my way all the way around. Obviously because it's rounded as well, you can only go through a couple beads at a time anyway. There's no need to try and force it, you'll probably just end up breaking a bead or something. So I tend to find about 2 beads at a time works well for me. Except when I get to this point here, if I can just go through, straight through all 3 of the GemDuos. Like that. Rotate it around. Do the same on this side here. And then when we do this as well, you find that you can actually feel it getting stronger as well as you're holding it in your hand, which is obviously why we're doing it. So it kind of proves that it works. Through the next couple. Make sure you pull your thread tight. You don't have to pull hard on it or anything, but just make sure you avoid having loose thread. I think I just missed that last bicone, so I'll just go through it now. Because it's always hard to go back somewhere if you realize you have some loose thread. It's always hard to go back to it once you've kind of moved on from it. So just make sure you keep an eye on it throughout. And then again, go through these GemDuos as well to the opposite side if you can, through all of them. And do any little knots. I like to kind of use my needle for that a lot of time because it can really get in there, whereas your fingers can be a little bit fiddly sometimes. Just like that. We've now gone an extra time all the way around. And now we actually do need to continue in the same way here, but only because we need to make our way to the next point where we need to add new beads in. So I'm just going to continue around this side again, the outside edge. And obviously it's just reinforcing it a bit more, which never hurts. Pull that through. Just avoiding any knots there. Do a couple beads at a time, just like before. Because then we need to get to the point here where basically we need to add our next GemDuo in between those 2, in my case the silver ones, which is then the beginning of the next star. Go through there. So we can then now just go through all 3 of these GemDuos straight through like that. And pull my thread through. Again, using needle here, I find, because you can really get it in between the thread if it's kind of curling up a little bit on you. And pull it through. Just like that, and again just double check, make sure it's tight, and it is. I don't seem to have any loose thread. So now to get into position, we basically just have to repeat what we've just done. So just to show you how to start out, we need to come through from this left side of this top GemDuo, the silver one in my case, come down through the other hole that hasn't been used yet in the opposite direction, through like that, because then we're in between these two where we need to slot in the next one, which in my case here I'm then using the other color. So I just lay that ready, and then again make sure to go through that in the right direction, in the right hole. So through like that, and then you can go straight through the next GemDuo as well, the bottom one. So when you pull this tight, just got a little knot there. The tail kind of wants to curl up around the other one. Yeah, I can see it right there. But this is what I mean, I like to use the needle to undo it because I couldn't really get my fingers anywhere near that. But you can really get the tip of the needle in if you need to. And pull this, so this then slots in. It's perfectly like that. And then again, just like in the beginning here, because right now what we're doing here is the exact same that we did with the first 4 beads there. So I just want to go around the bottom side of this GemDuo, this other one, go back through, straight through these 3, if you can, all at a time, otherwise do 1 or 2 at a time. And then pulling it all the way through, because we then need to get our thread into position to start making the next star. So this is where we then go down through from the top again, but then make sure we have our needle come out between the blue one. So the first bead here, GemDuo, that's going to be the first one in the new star, and between the bottom one, which in my case is silver. Pull that through, just like we did with the very first one here. And this is now in position that we can go through the outer hole in this blue one in the opposite direction. And our thread is now ready to add in the rest of the GemDuos for this star here and for this color. So again, you just lay them out ready if you need to make sure you're going through the right hole in the right direction, just like that. And then you otherwise just want to repeat what I showed you here to create this one, and you want to keep repeating this to basically build up the length that you need. So I've now kept going here until I've reached the point where I'm pretty much running out of my thread. I haven't really got enough left to keep working with. So what I'm going to just do is show you how to add in a new thread. Obviously, unless you're working with one length, you're probably going to have to add in, because otherwise we have to work with a ridiculously long length really, and this is going to be quite unmanageable. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I've got my thread to the point where I actually want to attach the other thread, and then obviously finish this off as well. And I've ended up right in between 2 GemDuos there, but on the back of the piece. So just like this is just a place where I feel like it's really nice to finish it off, and it'll hide the thread with the knot that we're adding nicely as well. Now this trick here I learned from the Potomac Beacon mini tutorials, and it's really quite clever. So I've already got my new thread ready, and you can just use whatever length you want to, because I might have to do this a few times throughout anyway. So just whatever you're comfortable working with. Then what I'm going to do is towards one end of my thread here, I'm just going to leave a little bit of a tail. So this is the new one. Then I have the old one that's still attached to my piece. And first of all, I need to take the new one and tie a knot around that old one. So I just bring the tail through here and bring it around kind of in a circle. And just so we have enough of a tail basically to work with. And then I want to tie this knot into, or this thread into a knot. So around the same thread here. So just a regular knot, and you just tighten this. You can see there, kind of have a circle around the old thread, and you just tighten this. And right now it's a little bit up the thread, it's not all the way down, but don't worry about that. And then I just like to do another one, just so it's a little bit more secure. And then now what I do is we need to push this down, because obviously right now we have too much kind of spare thread right there. So I'm just going to take the tail and hold on to the old thread, and then you push that knot down pretty much just as far as it'll go if you can get it in between those beads there. Something like that. Then I need to take the old thread, what I have left, that tail, and then the new thread, just a short tail, and then I tie them together with each other, just in a knot like this. And then pull that nice and tight all the way down. And again, I'm just doing another one to make it a bit more secure. And I still have my needle on that old thread, just because I'm just going to be bringing it to somewhere else within my beadwork still. And then pull that nice and tight. So now we have a little knot sitting down there, tying those two threads together. So obviously the old one still, but then also that new one. And I have my long tail on the new one going away from piece that we can then start using in a bit. But then what I just want to do is get my tails here that are just tied together a little bit away from here, because obviously we need to also cut off the excess of the thread. I'm not personally going to do that straight away. I'm just going to leave them until the end to go back and do all of them. But I just want to kind of get them into place of where I'm going to cut them off. Might as well do that now. So that's why I've left that needle on the old thread. Just going to start with that. And you just basically want to find a path here. So I'm going to go through. I'm not going to go through the path that I'm naturally going in. So right now it's coming out between these two GemDuos there. So what I'm actually needing to do is continue the actual path around here. That's the last path on this little section I've got to do. And then obviously go up and just start a new one. But with the old thread, I'm just working on the back here. I'm just going to take a different path so we don't go through the same path. And it's literally just going through a few beads really. So that once we do go to cut it off, I have to push that through to the front. Something like that. Just so we get that away from where the knot is, because otherwise it's going to be more likely to come undone. And obviously we don't want that. Still want it to be nice and secure. So literally just kind of follow a path around a few times. You can also tie a few knots here. It might be a good idea as well, like you would do also finishing off all the other cords or threads anyway. I'm going to show you that later on. Then once you've kind of got that in place, I would then pick up the other tail and go through a different path here as well. Same principle, just a different path. And then once you've done that, we're then going to have the long tail ready to pick up the original path we need to go to. Obviously put your needle onto the threads that you're working with. Then going to take, once I've done the other tails, my needle off, put it onto the new long thread, and then pick back up the path that I need to go around and finish up. And then we can literally just continue adding in the beads in the same way. So now I kept adding in my little stars like this until I reached the midpoint, and that's going to be this light blue color in my case. So obviously this is going to be 1/2 of the necklace. So what we need to do now is just make this next part a little bit different. The same basic principle, but just slightly different. So what we can actually achieve is make this V shape with the necklace that's going to lay nicely on the neckline then. So like I said, it's the same basic principle that we're going to be doing. The only difference is going to be where we do it. So instead of just continuing making this straight like we've been doing, we need to basically place these silver GemDuos in a different place instead. So first of all, we need to continue. The first place we need to get to is that very next GemDuo. So I'm just going to add one bicone to get to that first of all, just like previously. And then bring that all the way through. And then instead of continuing where we add 2 bicones on the side, like we've been doing throughout, here I want to actually already add in my silver GemDuos in this case, so basically the connection ones. So to do that, this is where we need to add first of all 1 bicone, and then one of, in my case, the silver ones, again making sure we go through from the right side. So it's going to fit like this. And then we can go through that next GemDuo in the last star that we made. So just like this here. That sits there now, and then it's after this we need to add the other GemDuo, again from the same side, and then after the GemDuo we add in the bicone, where we then jump to the next GemDuo in that last star. Just like that here. and not get caught up on any tools lying around. And pull that through. And then you can see they just now sit in a slightly different place, which when we now continue, this is the next point here I want to add, because this is a larger jump. I need to add 2 of my bicones. That's all we really got to think of, is when it's a large gap between where we don't add a GemDuo, that's where we need to add 2 bicones. If I can get my needle through. And then you just go to the next GemDuo there and pull through. You can see otherwise that's the same principle. Just make sure I don't get tangled up. And then those 2 bicones just slot in perfectly between there. And otherwise you continue, the next one also needs to be 2 bicones. As you can see, that's a large gap again. And then the last one is where we go back to the previous connection point, so that's just a single bicone. And then otherwise it's the same principle. You want to reinforce that and then make your way back around to this next connection point, which obviously in a slightly different place now, but otherwise it's the exact same principle. And then from here on you just continue in a straight line, which is going to be the other half of the necklace. So now that I kept going here and I reached all the way to the other end and I made sure both sides are the same length, then what you just want to make sure to do on this end is we have these 2 connection beads that we've had throughout, but then instead of making another star here, we just want to add another connection color bead there in between those 2 to finish it off nicely and be the same as we have right in the beginning. So just add that in between instead, but then what we need to do is get to the point where we can then add our wire protector as well. It's going to sit right on the end of that extra bead that we've added in. So to get to the point where we can do that is I need to get right to the point of that bead. So first of all I want to go through, but then come out in between that middle one and the bottom one. Just like we would normally do if we continued adding in the stars. And then we need to get to the outer hole here. Just like that. And then we bring in the wire protector. And what you have is, this is a little horseshoe where you have 2 little holes, one on either side, and then there's a channel that runs all the way along the top there. So I want to go through one of the holes with my needle, coming from the open end and going towards the little loop part. Then I need to come down through the other side in the opposite direction. So like that, and then pull this thread tight, and then when you pull it down, make sure that it actually then lays into that little well and doesn't go along down the side or anything. So just double check that it's in that well, but then just leave it there for now. I'm going to then go back through that outer hole in my GemDuo, because then we need to pull this tight so the wire protector is going to actually sit right on the point there. So just maneuver it into place just like that, and then basically I just want to go through this a few times now to obviously secure it more, because right now we're only going through it once and we need a little bit more security than that. As you can see, it's still kind of loose as well, so just pull it down again, and the more you go through it now a few times, it's going to get more secure. Down through the other side. Every time you do that, making sure that the thread lays inside that well there. Go through the GemDuo hole. Now what I also like to do is kind of go down to the other hole in the same GemDuo here. Just get in between the beads and then just go through this GemDuos, will come out between the other 2. Pull your thread to lay along the side of that, come up in the outer hole again, and then just go through it 1 or 2 more times. I just like doing that to kind of make it a little bit more cohesive as part of the piece. And now it's definitely also much more secure here, it's not going to keep moving around. Come through again, making sure that the thread goes into the well, And then I'll probably get one more time, so I'm just going to go through it one more time, and that'll be about 4 or so for me, which will be nice and strong. There's also a limit to how many times you can do it, because then at one point you can't really get the thread through anymore, both the holes in the beads, but also there won't really be space for any more thread in that well on top. So just make sure you don't do too many, something like that. And then all I'm going to do now is make my way back towards the bracelet, oh sorry, the necklace really. Go in towards basically that last star, because then what we need to do is really just finish off the thread. So get to a point here where we can start doing that. I'm making my way following the thread paths that I've been doing throughout. Making my way straight to the other side. So then I'm just going to show you how to finish off the thread, and it's going to be the same for any of the remaining thread that we've had or added throughout the rest of the necklace. Push that through like that, and then I'm going to start finishing it off on this outer edge here. You can see there. What I'm going to do is start tying knots. I'm just going to go through that first bicone. I prefer to tie my knots not in front of a bicone, but rather in front of a GemDuo. So right now I have my thread coming out between this bicone here and that GemDuo. So what I'm going to do is take my needle and then come up through. You have a little gap here between those two blue GemDuos, or the silver and the blue one rather, and then that bicone as well. So bring your needle up through there, but instead of pulling it all the way through, just getting my thread tangled a little bit here. Just get that undone. Even though we're making knots, we obviously want to do it on our terms, not because the thread is getting tangled. Just release that there. There we go. Pull that through, but not all the way. We don't want to pull it tight. I leave a little loop just like that. And then I take my needle and go through that loop. And I like to go through it twice. So through it again in the same direction. And then we need to make sure that all the threads here are laying between that bicone and that GemDuo. So it stays in the place where it's coming out from. Then you just pull at it, pull it tight, and then we've created a little knot there now around all the threads that are going through these beads in the first place. And then we take our needle through that GemDuo and pull at it a little bit, so the knot there more or less comes inside the bead and gets hidden nicely. Go through the next few beads. So the next two bicones there to then come out between that bicone and the next GemDuo, and you basically just do the same to make a knot here, and then you just want to keep doing this. So make quite a few knots. It also depends how much thread you've got left. So go around, follow your thread path. You can come around the other side of the same one, or maneuver your way down to the next one, make some knots, and then all you got to do is make however many knots you want to. I feel it's nice and secure, then you can cut off the excess. Make sure once you make your very last knot though that you go away from that knot before you then cut off your thread, because otherwise that knot's just going to come undone. But then you just want to get rid of this thread and all the other ones throughout, and then you can use these wire protectors here to attach whatever findings that you want to. So now I got rid of all the threads, which means my necklace is done and it's ready to wear. And also I've attached my findings on the other end there. So to those wire protectors, I've got a lock clasp and extender chain. Obviously you can use whatever kind of clasp that you want to. But then this is what the necklace looks like. So because we have that kind of bend in the middle of it, it lays really nicely on the neckline. Now one thing I do just want to mention is that this necklace is designed to lay pretty close to your neckline, so it's fairly short, but if you prefer longer necklaces you can still make it. I do just recommend that you alter it slightly. And that alteration is right here in the middle, so where we have that bend in the piece. Now where I made it is we have a GemDuo between the two connection points, in this case here, and that'll lay nicely in the neckline when it's shorter. If you want it longer, what I recommend that you do is when you continue after you're making the bend here, that you move that second connection point to be right next to the first one. So that'll give a different angle, which if you want a longer necklace, that'll lay better on your neckline. So basically, instead of making this second connection point when continuing after the bend around this GemDuo here, you would do it around this one that's right next to the other connection point that was already there. But obviously that all depends on the kind of necklace that you want. Now, I really hope you enjoyed the tutorial for this necklace here. Obviously you can make it look very different depending what colours that you choose to combine as well. Now also do check out the tutorial that I made for the bracelet originally. It looks like this here, so obviously you can make it to match as a set now. Now, we'll leave a link in the description box down below to where you can find the tutorial easily, so feel free to check that out. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Also, check out my channel. If you like jewelry making tutorials, I have loads of them and I'm going to keep making more, so do feel free to subscribe as well so you don't miss any. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this one. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.